Ever tried editing, like a really high-res video on an old laptop?
Oof, yeah.
It's brutal.
Yeah.
And that's basically the struggle for a lot of digital artists every day, right? Especially
Hmm.
with these crazy detailed 3D graphics. You need some serious processing power.
For sure.
And that's where this whole render network thing comes in, which is what we're diving into today. We've got their white paper, by the way. It's linked in the show notes if you want to follow along. But
Yeah.
basically, they're trying to solve this huge problem for artists, developers, anyone who needs, industrial grade rendering, but without the industrial grade price tag.
Yeah, and it's really about changing how we think about digital creation, period.
Yeah.
I mean, the white paper really lays out this vision where high-end rendering isn't some like special effect that only big studios can afford.
Right.
It's more like internet access. It should just be available to everyone.
Okay, so I'm hearing democratizing digital creation, which is a big promise, obviously.
Hmm.
But how are they actually doing it? Like, we already have cloud rendering services, right?
Right, but those are like still centralized,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
One company owns all the hardware, they decide the prices. If their servers go down, everybody's kind of screwed.
True, true.
The render network is doing something completely different. They're building a decentralized network, so instead of one company's data center, they're tapping into all this unused processing power from GPUs, like
Yeah.
all over the world.
Wait, so those gaming PCs that are just like gathering dust
Exactly.
could be part of this render network?
They could be, which is a huge deal because it's
Yeah.
not just about making rendering cheaper, right? It's also about making it more resilient,
Uh-huh.
more accessible, and honestly, way more democratic. Because anyone with a decent GPU can join the network. They can actually contribute their processing power, get rewarded for it.
Okay, I'm starting to see why this is such a big deal. But before we go too far down that road, let's make sure everyone understands the actual problem they're solving.
Sure.
So, for most artists out there, what does the current rendering situation even look like?
It's kind of like, okay, imagine like the hottest day of the year, right?
Okay, yeah.
And there's like one water fountain and there's a massive line.
No, no.
That's kind of what it's like to get access to high-end rendering power today.
Yeah.
Like you have all these super talented artists all over the world, often on tight deadlines, small budgets.
Mhm.
They're all fighting for this very limited pool of
Yeah.
really expensive resources. And that's exactly what the white paper talks about. GPUs, right?
Mhm.
Huge demand, very limited supply. Prices go up, creativity gets stifled.
It's a bottleneck.
It's a huge bottleneck, yeah.
And I'm guessing that bottleneck is preventing some pretty amazing work from seeing the light of day.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm.
And we're talking everything here. We're talking filmmakers, game devs, architects, product designers, even scientists, right, who need to do complex simulations.
Wow.
I mean, the possibilities are pretty much endless. But if you can't get access to affordable rendering power, it's a huge roadblock.
And it's not just about like rendering a still image anymore, right? This feels way bigger. Like it could totally change how we even experience digital stuff.
Oh, absolutely. And that's something the Render Network white paper really digs into is like all these different applications, even beyond just traditional rendering. Like take NFTs, for example.
Okay, so NFTs, everyone's talking about them. I'll be honest, I'm still kind of wrapping my head around the whole thing. How does that even connect to rendering?
So it all comes down to like trust and verification. Like say you buy a piece of digital art as an NFT.
Hmm.
How do you actually know it's the original, not just a copy that someone made?
Right, right.
And that's what the Render Network is trying to solve, basically. They bake that blockchain technology directly into the rendering process itself.
Interesting.
So every step, from the artist's original files all the way to that final image that gets rendered, that all gets logged on the blockchain.
It's like a digital fingerprint.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like you cannot fake it.
Yeah.
And so when you buy that NFT, you're not just buying the art, you're buying proof of its entire creation.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that is cool. Okay. So what other applications are out there? Because you said NFTs were just one example.
Well, one that's really interesting to me is AI, like AI-powered creation.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
We've all seen those AI image generators now, right?
Yeah, it's crazy.
But imagine giving those AI tools access to like the raw power of the render network.
Okay.
We're talking about AI actually collaborating with artists to make these incredibly detailed 3D models,
Mhm.
maybe even generating entire virtual worlds. I mean, stuff that would just melt a normal computer.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it makes me think too about GPU streaming because that's another area where this could be massive, right? Like I've always wanted to try those super high-end VR experiences, but my laptop's just like, nope,
Yeah, I
I
feel
just can't handle it.
totally. But imagine a world where literally anyone, no matter what kind of computer they have, could experience the most demanding games or 3D content. And that's the whole promise of GPU streaming, which the render network is really well positioned to solve because instead of relying on just one company's servers, they've got this huge network of GPUs all over the place.
Right.
So it could actually make that high-fidelity streaming the norm, not just for gaming, but for like architecture, education, you name it.
Oh, yeah. That's like the jump from dial-up to broadband, but for like experiences. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the why, like what problems Run Your Network is solving, all these possibilities they're unlocking.
Hmm.
But I also kind of want to get into the how a little bit. Like, what is the magic behind all of this?
Yeah, for sure. So at the core of it all is this idea of decentralization, which we touched on a bit earlier. So instead of having just one central server, the render network is more like this giant web of computers, all connected, and they're all working together to share their processing power,
Okay.
which not only makes it, way more resilient,
Right.
but it also means that there's no single point of failure.
Right, because if one computer goes down,
Exactly.
it's not the end of the world.
Exactly. The network just reroutes and everyone keeps going.
That's so smart. Okay, I get the decentralization part, but how do you actually wrangle all those different computers, potentially thousands of them, to render one image or experience? Like, that sounds incredibly complicated.
It is, but that's where the tech gets really interesting. There are a few key things that the render network uses to make it all work, and one of them is this special file format that they developed called ORBX.
ORBX, is that like their secret sauce?
It kind of is. Think of it like this. You take a complex 3D model, and you're breaking it down into this set of instructions that any computer on the network can understand and work with.
Okay.
And it's not just about splitting up the work. It's about making sure that each of those individual rendering tasks is optimized for all those different machines because they all have different hardware. So this ensures that the rendering process is as fast and as efficient as possible.
So ORBX is like the common language that lets all these different computers talk to each other.
Yes, exactly. Like a universal language for rendering.
I love it. Okay, so you've got the decentralization, you've got ORBX. What else?
So to make sure that everyone's doing their part and the quality stays high, they also have this really clever reputation system built in.
Ooh, a reputation system.
Mhm.
I like where this is going. Tell me more.
So every computer that contributes to the render network, we call those nodes. By the way, they earn a reputation score based on how fast their work is and how good it is.
Makes sense.
And of course, the higher your score, the more rendering jobs you get.
Right?
And more money you can earn, basically.
It's like a meritocracy for computers.
It really is.
I love it. Okay, so, but what about like the cheaters? Because there's always someone who's going to try to game the system.
Right, but that's the great thing about using the blockchain for all of this, because it's like really secure. So the network actually has all these mechanisms to like detect and prevent that kind of cheating.
Oh, okay.
So, for example, you might have multiple nodes all rendering the same chunk of data, and then their results get compared to make sure they're all consistent.
Wow.
So if one node is trying to cut corners or send back bad data, it gets flagged and their reputation takes a hit. And so over time, this actually ensures that only the most reliable, the most trustworthy nodes get those really high-end rendering jobs.
Okay, wow, my mind is officially blown. I think I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together now. The decentralized network, ORBX, the reputation system.
Yeah.
It's like they thought of everything.
And honestly, we're just scratching the surface here. Like, the really exciting part is that render network could change not just what we create,
Yeah.
but like how we work in the first place,
Yeah.
how we even think about what creativity is worth. You know?
Totally. And how we experience the internet, like the whole thing.
Exactly.
So let's talk about that. Because we've touched on a few ways this could be huge, but like, if we zoom out, what kind of future are we even talking about here?
Well, the white paper actually gets into this, and one thing they highlight is the future of work.
Yeah.
Like, imagine your location doesn't matter anymore, even if you don't have thousands of dollars for fancy hardware. You can still work on these huge, groundbreaking projects.
Yeah.
The render network could actually power like a global network of artists, developers, designers, all working together on stuff that used to be impossible unless you were a huge studio.
It's like the gig economy, but for like high-end digital creation.
Exactly.
Which I like. So what about the artists themselves, though? Like, how does this change things for them?
Well, right now, artists have to give up a lot of control over their work a lot of times, especially when they're working with like a bigger company, right?
Right.
But the render network with this blockchain technology could totally flip that whole thing on its head. We talked about NFTs before, right? Well, imagine artists can actually keep ownership of their digital creations, and they automatically get paid every time their work is used because it's all built into these smart contracts on the blockchain.
So they have more creative freedom and they have more control over how it's used and how much it's worth.
Exactly.
There's amazing. Okay, so speaking of huge changes, we got to talk about the metaverse.
Of course.
It feels like everyone's saying that word, but I'm not sure anyone actually knows what it means.
It's true. It's definitely still early days, but one thing's for sure, to build these crazy, immersive virtual worlds, it's going to take a ton of rendering power.
And Render Network is already here for it.
Exactly. It's like they built the engine before the car even existed.
Totally one step ahead.
Whether it's rendering these realistic avatars or like complex environments or even entire virtual cities, the render network could be what makes it all possible because creators could actually push the boundaries of what's even possible right now.
It's mind-blowing. We went from like, my laptop can barely edit this video to a whole future of democratized creation, blockchain ownership, the metaverse. It's a lot.
It is a lot to take in, but that's the amazing thing about the render network. It's not just a tech solution. It's like this whole new way of thinking about what we can even do with digital creation.
Totally. So to everyone listening out there, if you could create anything, no matter how complex, how ambitious, what would it be? What kind of world would you build if rendering power was unlimited? That's something to think about
Yeah.
as you explore the render network. And until next time, happy rendering.